Okay, thank you. A wise man by the name of John Colwell, who used to teach at Spurgeon's College, always had one question that everybody should ask, and I think every preacher, whoever you are, should ask: what kind of God? And I think that's what we were really dealing with in the last piece of input. I think that's really, if you wanted me to get down to brass tacks, what I was trying to get you to think through my lens. So, every time somebody speaks about God, every time somebody makes it, you could have that question: well, what sort of God actually is that person portraying? Because what sort of God you're portraying will depend about the answers that you offer to all of life's problems. And that is particularly true to those in the room who are pastors. My second piece of input is a disabled aware preacher. And what I want to do is to open up something that has actually sort of been alluded to by the comment that Fran made, that we concentrate on one group and we forget everybody else. Unfortunately, there's not a way around that. And, when one speaks about 14.8 disabled people, you are not talking about one type of group or one type of person. You are talking about people with all sorts of physical needs, emotional needs, mental capacity. Some of us have been lifers. Yes, I'm a lifer. I've been disabled for all of my life. Others have lost something, and there's a whole interaction, a whole session, a whole evening about the relationship with losing your abilities and grief. I'll avoid that rabbit hole, but it's one that one should always have in mind. But you're not dealing with one sort of group of people. And disability is hard to define and therefore often hard to deal with. And over the years, people have used a couple of models to explain how what disability is and how to fix it and how to understand it. And I'm going to just briefly say what those are in ordinary English, because that's all I do is ordinary English, and then make you see how these can sometimes affect your view of God and view of a text. So the first model is called the medical model, And as it suggests, it's about conditions, it's about syndromes, it's about symptoms, it's about what is wrong with a person that makes them the way that they are. And so when you are presented with a medical condition, whether that's a physical one, a mental one, an emotional one, if you're following a medical model all the way through, you're asking these sort of questions: how do I cure the person? How do I heal or make things better and more comfortable? How do I mend and fix something? And then that then filters down to society. So you've got occupational therapists and others are wanting, that doing their good work. And it's all about mending and fixing and adapting. And then you have the whole thing about social care system, which again is all about mending and adapting, managing a problem. How do we manage these people? How do we manage them enough that, things will be well? It's about management. And it's about somebody, an expert, saying, I know what the problem is. Let's get a whole load of experts into a room together and say, how do we manage so and so? So somebody, so for me, born blind, the professors said why it was. The doctors dealt with the emotional fallout and all of that of my parents as to discovering all of this and how the things were going to go forward. And other experts about what schooling was going to be. And then other experts deciding when I should, because I should be sent away at school and trying to override what the parents thought. And before you know it, you are being managed. And it doesn't change. You go to college, how do we manage the problem? You go and visit a church, how do you manage the problem? And that's fine, as far as it goes. And so when you look at as far as it goes, a throwaway remark, it's a very important remark because it only goes so far. So when you look at the scriptures, you could probably see medical model everywhere. Jesus is presented with people with various forms of ailment, and they are touched and they are restored. And a superficial reading of any healing passage looks medical, doesn't it? It looks about, here's this person, they can now function. They can now, that's the problem with this person is a condition. The way to manage it is to manage the condition and manage the needs accordingly. Nothing wrong with it as far as it goes, those magic words. But in the 80s and 90s, and one of the good things that came over from the United States, because, it does happen, is the growth of what became known as the social model. Now, it does have extremes, this. So, I do think it fills in some of the gaps. But in and of itself, in its purest form, it says that the disabling factor is a society one. It is about attitudes and society. And once those are broken, you'll have better enablement. And there is some truth to that in as far as it goes. It is true that society is pitted against people with attitudes and so on, that somehow, and some of these attitudes have gone down far through the ages. The idea that sight is to do with knowledge and is to do with insight, so therefore blindness is to do with dark and evil and so on, is a long-held view. In the language we use, it's all is about walking. It's about standing. And, some people simply can't. And so if we eliminate all the language barriers, we'll solve the problem. That's fine, in as far as it goes. But it is, and if you look at the scriptures again, you can actually look at some of the healing passages through the social model. So Jesus heals people, and they immediately, so the leper, a leper is an obvious example. Lepers lived in people's skin diseases, and that lived in communes. They lived at the edges of society. Jesus heals them, and immediately they're back in the center. And the society attitudes change. The attitudes towards the person change. Now, it explains some of it. This is all very, very simple explanations. But what actually is really needed is a combination of the two in terms of friendship, a friendship model. And I think there's something very theological about friendship. Jesus, one of the most powerful things, if you're asking the question, what sort of God? When people say, who's Jesus to you? I immediately say friend. Without any hesitation, God is my friend. Father's great, it's a good, useful thing. So are many of us, but I immediately think of friends because it's friends who've enabled me all my life, not so much family. Sometimes my family worked against me. Sometimes my family wanted to manage me. And there's sometimes those painful realizations that actually for a while you've got to break away. So I moved 500 miles south deliberately to do my ministerial training, to break the chain, to break the hold, to break the, yes, caring, but it was spilling into controlling, and it worked. But friends, I can think of so many friends who have been like family to me, who understood, who asked the right questions, who took the rough with the smooth, who made various sacrifices, to be my friend and to stand up for me and advocate for me and allow me to do various things. I could not be a minister without certain friends who championed me, who gave me a kick in the pants when I was thinking I couldn't do it, and who enabled me to do what I needed to do. It wasn't about breaking social taboos for them. It wasn't about curing or managing me. It was about, I'm your friend. I want to hang out with you. And you really, really knew that they'd arrived at this when they said, and somebody's made this quote, and I will not go where you're not allowed to go. And it's been lovely when friends who say, you go to something and say, well, you and your dog aren't welcome. Well, we're not going to stay here either. We're not welcome, and we'll never come to your business ever again. That's really what being friends is about. And that's what you and I can be to one another in church, isn't it? That's what watching over one another is all about, befriending people. We won't go where others can't go. We won't get in the way of where others are. Right away through the Bible is that the Bible story is about God's friendship towards us and how we could become friends with God. Well, we have funny long words for it. But that's essentially what it means. It's about how can humanity, a broken, fallen humanity, become friends? How can we be friends with one another and friends with the world? That's really what the Christian life is about. That's really what Christian mission is about. That's really what Christian teaching is about. And disability provides a light on this because we need friends to enable us to become abled in society, to take a place and fulfill our gifts and do what we need to do. Therefore, it promotes a model of friendship for our communities and a model of friendship towards God, which is good and wholesome and healthy. And it's right the way through the core of Scripture, like Blackpool Rock, how God befriends us, befriends the world who rejected him, and wants us all to be his friends. I'm no longer servants, because a servant doesn't know his master's business, but I call you friends. That's a equalizing passage. It's not the experts know best. It's not about certain people know better than me and manage me and control me. God isn't a God of managing me and controlling me. God is about befriending me. And that's the evangelistic message each and every one of us share. And so when you're coming and approaching the texts, and particularly approaching the disability texts, you will be bringing your fact that you think it's a medical thing, and there's nothing wrong with that in as far as it goes. Many of you who are socially aware will be saying that this whole problem is just about, barriers and prejudices and that's fine, just as long as it goes. But if you want something simple to do, if you want something simple to hold on to the model of friendship, because every one of us can understand friendship. Every one of us needs friendship. Everyone gets friendship with God. And the question you need to ask ourselves as preachers and pastors, how are we stopping befriending a group of people we find awkward? How are we turning people who are awkward into friends? How are we really providing that friendship that everybody deserves? How are we championing people and befriending them? Remember what I said at the end of the first session, and I'll say it again at the end of this one. It's really, said he, forgetting what he's going to say. It's really all about, it is all about relationship. It really is all about getting to know one another and these sort of practical things. So just get about the business of befriending folk. That's what inclusion's all about. Barriers, those awkwardnesses, into true and meaningful friendship. Everything is about relationship in the long run, including our preaching. I think I've finished, but I want you to do an exercise for me. It's a very specific exercise. I want you to get into some text, and I've chosen an obvious one. If you've been around the disabled world long enough, there's a charity, in fact, called Through the Roof, who I highly recommend. I'm one of their ambassadors, I suppose, who got their title from Mark 2:1-12, that famous passage where Jesus heals the paralytic. And I want you to look at that passage. I want you to enter its world. I want you to look at its words. And I want you to think, what's going on? And in the light of what I've said, how are folk behaving? What is Jesus seem to be saying? How are the friends reacting? There's so much material to sort of anchor what I've said and work through what I've said, or start the process at any rate in Mark 2, 1 to 12. So that's what I want you to do, is to just spend 10 minutes or so going through that text. And not a sermon plan or anything, just what the text conveys to you, what questions it raises, and see where we're going from here. So let's work with the text for 10 minutes.
Thanks very much indeed, Glenn. Can you kindly just mention the text one more time? What's the reference, please?
Mark